Okay, I imagine that new people will be joining. We can probably start. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on Rob Vanderberg's newest insightful book called Evidence for Hope: The Emerging Sustainability Revolution. We are honored to have you, Rob, with us. Rob is a visiting professor at King's College London, something that is always said about him, but I think more importantly, a distinguished leader in the field of evaluation. With a career spanning several decades, he has made significant contributions to the understanding and practice of evaluation in the context of sustainability and global development. Rob has published over 25 articles and chapters and co-edited 7 books on subjects ranging from history of development to research funding and evaluation issues, especially in the light of sustainable development. In Evidence for Hope, Rob critically examines the interplay of evidence, causality, systemic transformation, drawing from his extensive experience and interdisciplinary perspective. He explores the evolution of worldviews shaping evidence, from religion to science and beyond, and emphasizes the critical role of causality in understanding and addressing sustainable challenges. His books, and especially this one, also dwells into transformational systems thinking and catalytic pathways to impactful change. Let me also, this time around, introduce 2 reviewers, because later I'm so much in the emotions after the presentation of the book, and I bet I will be again. I want to make sure we know that our esteemed colleagues, Scott Chaplow and Sonal Zaveri, are wonderful reviewers who agreed to make comments, which is challenging on this book. Sonal Zaveri is an independent evaluation expert with over 30 years of experience in strategic planning, program design, capacity building, and mentoring. She holds a PhD in social work and was a Fleischman Fellow at Duke University in USA. She is a founder and board member of the Community of Evaluators South Asia and holds leadership roles in several international evaluation networks, including Eval Gender Plus and Eval Partners. Her interests focus on rights, participation, transformation, gender, using collaborative and culturally responsive evaluation approaches. Good to have you with us, Sonal. And Scott, our dear colleague as well, is a specialist in evaluation and strategic planning with over 30 years of experience in civic, public, and private organizations to find sustainable solutions for social and environmental challenges. He has held prominent roles, including Director of Evidence Monitoring and Evaluation for the Climate Change Portfolio at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, and Senior M&E Advisor with the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Scott has authored numerous articles, books, and guidelines on evaluation and development, and is active in several international evaluation forums. Sorry, but I really don't want to miss any part of your extensive experiences. So that was a bit red, but I just want to explain also how we're going to have this webinar run. It was a short introduction of all the speakers, but for now we're going to give the voice to Rob for 20 minutes. Then each of us reviewers, Sonal and Scott, will have 5 minutes. And we'll try to have Q&A for 15 minutes with some closing remarks from the panelists. We want to keep it within 1 hour, but keep it exciting for you. So please put your questions in the chat and I will try to moderate them straight after or his presentation or after the reviewers' presentations. Rob, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, many thanks for this. I assume that I will now share my screen. So let's see. Yes, is this working? Are you seeing? Oh, well, I see fingers raised. So thumbs up. Okay, so let me start. Oh, I think some of you need to mute your microphones. Could everybody mute their microphones? Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to present my book. It was published in July, but books are slow to take on, and any opportunity to explain what it is about should be taken. My main message is that there is a lot of solid evidence that we can solve our sustainability problems. While the fossil fuel industry and many politicians continue to tell us that fossil fuels are way cheaper and better than renewable energies, an energy revolution is taking place that will democratize energy and will make sustainable options and solutions possible, including achieving social justice. There is evidence, furthermore, that we know how to do this. This is what the book presents. Let us start. The situation we are in is that there is an apparent consensus amongst scientists and the general public that climate change is happening and going in the wrong direction. Yet governments are not meeting obligations and doing what needs to be done. Instead, many governments are actually subsidizing fossil fuel use. This has a long history. In 2014, when I was director of the Independent Evaluation Office of the Global Environment Facility, we calculated that for every dollar spent on climate action, $100 was spent on subsidies. These numbers are now going in the right direction, and investments in renewable energies are now higher than investments in fossil fuels. Yet subsidies of fossil fuels continue. Since 2014, the evidence on climate change has become more solid and rigorous, yet it is not leading to action. We all know that evidence has become highly problematic in the past decade. Social media bubbles promote conspiracy evidence, and politicians just claim evidence without providing the justifications. Some of the problems are the responsibility of scientists who cater to the evidence-based policies movement. They claim that only counterfactual evidence should be accepted. But a great number of sciences establish rigorous evidence without counterfactuals. Physics, chemistry, astronomy, information and system sciences, such as the earth sciences and evolution. But more important even is that countries face challenges that are complex and multifaceted. They need evidence on how to navigate complexity and complex causal relationships to achieve sustainability. So we need to agree on evidence. What is evidence? The curious issue is that evidence is an ordinary word in the English language. One is reminded of the definition of pornography that a US judge once uttered. I will know it when I see it. Only two areas of work have defined evidence: legal evidence as what counts in legal processes, and scientific evidence as what scientists accept from each other, with philosophers of science continuing to fight over what should be recognized and what not. In general, the public has a naive picture of evidence as the facts and data that describe reality in our countries and in the world. But data often just count things, whereas we are most interested in the relationships of these things to other things. We would like to discuss what we see as evidence through identifying the observations on which it is based, the explanations that we can think of, and the expectations of what we would find if the evidence was really that, evidence. So we need to agree on sustainability as well. Why should we try to become sustainable? After all, nothing from the past has turned out to be sustainable, not even rich and powerful empires. Social exclusion was the norm and slavery accepted worldwide. We should be happy, actually, that many of these injustices also turned out to not be sustainable. And we should work on making them unsustainable. We should be happy that injustices turned out in many cases not to be sustainable, but we need to take history into account. The book starts building up a picture of our current fight towards sustainability with the visit of Columbus to the Bahamas in 1492. It unleashed 6 nations of Western Europe onto the world, focusing on exploitative trade and colonialism. The Industrial Revolution led to more exploitative relationships and empire building. This revolution introduced the use of fossil fuels, which led to our current sustainability crisis. So we need to agree on causality and systems. In order to agree on that, we need to look at scientific thinking in the global West. For a long time, it focused on a reductionist perspective. Science could only come up with theories about reality if things were isolated from other things, which is why so much of Western science was developed in laboratories, where the world could be shut out and study could take place in isolation. This also led to a simple picture of causality as promoted by science, A causing B. But looking at A causing B in isolation in a controlled experiment leads to the discovery that with the reversal of time, B could also cause A, and this undermined further thinking about causality. It led to the statistical analysis of reality, as if the world we live in is a possibility and nothing more. Well, outside of the laboratory, simple causality does not exist. It is composed and complex causality, and it focuses on the relationships between all the elements in our world. System science on this is quite advanced, but it has not yet convinced popular opinion in many areas of the world. So let us look at the 3 domains of Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals: the social domain, the economic domain, and the environmental domain. But their relationships are currently skewed and unsustainable in the long run. The social domain is subservient to the economic domain. It delivers humans to work in enterprises that do not take care of them and pays them according to the country they live in rather than what they produce, and so on. The environmental domain is also subservient to the economic domain. It delivers resources and gives up its habitat and ecosystems, all for economic profit. And on top of that, usually it is the environment in the global South that has to pay for economic profits in the global West. But the environmental domain is not just used, it is overused. And then what we get is breaking through planetary boundaries. The overreach into environmental resources and the ongoing pollution of the environment through plastics and waste are breaking through several environmental planetary boundaries. Breaking through boundaries does not mean that we are exploring new territories. It just means that we use up more than Earth can offer us. This is strong evidence of unsustainability of current economies. Yet many people just shrug this off. Many are confident that we will find technological solutions. We actually need to look at the 2 domains exploited by the third, and we need to go to a sustainable world. And in this sustainable world, the interactions are closer, and we should really work with the interlinkages between the 3 domains. So these 3 domains, if they move together, they can contain sustainable interactions. And the good news is that there is a growing group of companies and enterprises in the economic circle that aim to move towards the social and environmental circus. So let us go to more good news. Although actually, I will start with the bad news first, which is that too many people are mainly moved by considerations of whether they have enough money, whether they can heat or cool their houses, and whether they can drive their cars. This they aspire to. The SDGs and the Paris Agreement are a bit distant in your average local community. But the good news is that renewable energy is now, at least for solar and wind power, cheaper than fossil fuels. And even better news is that renewable energy is local and can be democratized. One of the reasons why we are not optimistic about the future is that we watch the big oil companies and think they dictate our world. But households and communities are increasingly taking their own decisions about energy, and they go for cheaper energy. 4 tipping points in sustainability are now in reach or already happening. Solar power, wind power, electric cars, and batteries to store energy. Combined, these will lead to the third energy revolution in the terminology of geographers Lewis and Maslin. This overview of the tipping points is something to be read later. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it basically what you see here will explain why renewable energy is so much more sustainable than fossil fuels. With the current reserves we have discovered, we will run out of fossil fuels in 2060, 35 years from now. But the sun will actually continue to send us its energy for the next 5 billion years. And the sun currently delivers the energy that humanity needs annually in just 1.5 hours. That is quite a difference in perspective. Let me then also go into how revolutions happen. They have happened throughout history and everywhere in the world. They look like what physicists call phase transitions, like water turning into ice. All water molecules suddenly start behaving differently. There's no central command of one of the molecules telling the others how to behave. Revolutions, human revolutions are rather similar. Let us take the Industrial Revolution as an example. Humanity is not like water, but a lot happens by autonomous decisions of many people to go in a certain direction. And that direction now is sustainability. A good example is the campaign of Trump to become president. It's campaign of Trump to become president of the USA. Trump came out strongly against electric cars and clean energy until he decided to take up Elon Musk on his support for his candidacy. And somewhat sheepishly, he declared that electric cars were now okay. Musk is also convinced that humanity needs to reduce the level of CO2 in the atmosphere. Let us see how Trump will deal with this issue in his presidency. And once the local availability of solar panels becomes even cheaper than it already is, many people who have voted for Trump will buy them despite having been against them, as the savings are simply too attractive. And please remember that renewable energies do not require an OPEC, billionaires, or major companies like Exxon and Shell. Which brings us to working towards a just planet. So money tells us how the future will be shaped. Stocks of fossil fuel companies, which you see on the right side, are stagnant and no longer follow the stock index. The big challenge is to work towards a new world with social justice and healthy relationships between societies, economies, and the environment. And use the mountain of evidence that we have of successful pilot projects and programs to achieve sustainability in actual practice. My last slide just presents some energy investment trends, which confirm that the world is moving towards sustainability. Our challenge is to accompany this energy boom that will be astounding with social and commercial energy to ensure we are building good relationships between the environment and emerge from the current crisis. Governments and the emergence of far-right movements across the world seem to become fatalistic on humanity's future, as we have seen before in times of war and conflict. Many people seem to be willing, against better judgment, to forget about climate change, biodiversity loss, plastic and waste, and just accept whatever nature throws at us. My book contains a plea to make full use of evidence of the enormous possibility of the emerging sustainability revolution and shape our future along lines of social justice, economic prudence, and a healthy environment. Thank you very much for your attention. And back to you, Veronica.
Thank you very much, Rob. This was very interesting and thought-provoking. I believe it's best if the first voice to comment on it will be given to Sonal.
Thanks a lot, Veronica. Let me first say that it's my privilege to share my thoughts about a sweeping and consequential piece of work that Ron has put together in his book, Evidence for Hope. And the title itself is intriguing, as one wonders what sort of evidence can lead to hope, especially when we are being overwhelmed with evidence that indicates that our planet and our species are in planetary distress. In fact, I think Ron Milo and his co-authors have estimated that humans make up only, and I mean only 0.01% of the Earth's total biomass, and yet our species is a dominant player in shaping our biosphere. You know, Rob has had a very rich work history, and this book is unique because it weaves concepts, insights with what he's learned in practice, the insights he has gained, and may I add, the rich number of resources he has cited. So it's a very easy read because of that. And that is one of the first takeaways I took for understanding evidence, a word he suggests has come into parlance only recently. And he recommends a broad understanding of what evidence looks like. And I think by doing that, he demystifies it and in a sense, democratizes it. You know, that academic, disciplinary, only quantitative knowledge is not the only source of evidence. I really like the words he uses when he says reasoned judgment. And so ensuring that we distinguish it also from one of the banes of our times, which is the manipulation of evidence. And you know, there's much that I would like to discuss today from the book, but what has caught my attention was the extensive scholarly thought that has been put into understanding worldviews, which is really fundamental to capturing and analyzing evidence. What I took away about sustainability was that it should be viewed from an historical sense, and that the mostly mechanistic view of the world from the global West, and he uses the word global West and not global North, has led to the lack of attention to indigenous systems that are more holistic. And the colonies that were colonized were made to abandon centuries of knowledge to serve the so-called superior knowledge of the global West. And so the challenge, as stated in the book, was how to scale the wisdom of indigenous communities. And perhaps here, the book proposes not to have an either-or approach, but to embrace several worldviews, the economic, the social-political, the environmental, the indigenous ones, and to choose judiciously what makes the most sense. So the book does talk about the sustainability revolution following other revolutions that we are familiar with, like the industrial one, and suggests that we need to address this nexus of social, economic, and environmental domain, make them more interconnected, and reminding us that not to make the economic domain more predominant. You know, a good resource, which this book certainly is, always leads us to think of our own experiences. And so I am reminded of examples from my region that resonates with this conceptualization. Rob discusses the impact of colonialism, and one of the examples comes from India and the connection of empire and the Industrial Revolution in England. So reading this, I began to connect my own dots. We know that Gandhiji brought down the British Empire, through a nonviolent movement, but he did so with cotton, using the spinning wheel as a symbol of independence. So as long as you spun your own cotton for your needs, you did not depend on the empire for finished products, clothes, and apparel, and neither did the empire receive the raw materials to fuel their industries, the Industrial Revolution, so to speak. And so the economic was cleverly intertwined with the political social domain and, of course, the environment one. But history is often unkind, and shortly after independence, in search for more yields, BT cotton was introduced in the same areas where Gandhiji championed indigenous cotton varieties. And here we address the reasoned judgment of evidence, because as yields increased and a success story was trumpeted, one only needed to look at evidence, including observations and explanations of reasoned judgment, was related to the demise also of indigenous varieties and the high resource inputs for seeds sourced from and benefiting large corporations like Monsanto. And so we learn very clearly, and we put into practice some of the concepts from this book. The social, environmental, and economic domains, they coexist in a political environment and cultural context, which influences them so immensely. One of the other areas that I wanted to discuss, which the book does, is about the invisibility and the lack of attention to women and the many struggles that they've faced and are facing, political, social, electoral, and economic, to name a few. And an example that got my attention, noted an evaluation where agricultural extension, mostly by international workers, only approached male farmers, not understanding the huge background support provided by women, and that women farmers were actually in the majority. And today, women farmers are still less recognized, their work dismissed, and the drudgery that they put in still not counted in economic terms. Yet I think overall, if I look back to what I've read, there is a strong message of hope and very concrete reasons for it, suggesting that we must embrace the evidence for hope as the only and the most powerful way to bring change, both in ourselves and the world we live in. Thank you, Rob. That was a fantastic read.
Dear Sonal, it was a fantastic review. A real pleasure to listen to you, and I hope Rob will be able to was able to note a few points that he will respond to after Scott's review. Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veronica. And as Sonal said, it's a real privilege to be here. I had reading Rob's book raised a lot of reflections for me. He spoke about the broad use of evidence, and then I was thinking about how to respond to that. And then, Veronica, I think it was just a couple days ago, you reposted this, and you wrote, Scott Chaplow will help us explore where organizational responsibility must we be expecting beyond individual reflections. And so I decided to take a tack where I want to piggyback on what Rob has written about and building on the themes of hope and transformation, to consider, what does evidence mean for organizations working in sustainable development? I mean, Rob, I get you when you talk about, for example, dis and misinformation, and we can call that out. For organizations, I think there's some misunderstanding of evidence that's not as simple as just dis or misinformation. And that's kind of what I wanted to look about. And I think it's related, Rob, to what you're talking about with the counterfactual that you spoke about. In 2010, Andrew Natsios, a former administrator at USAID, he coined the term obsessive measurement disorder, or OMD, to describe the excessive fixation on quantitative evidence in government programs that leads to misguided policies, decisions, management practices, and such. OMD happens when the production of evidence-based data undermines the very interventions that they aim to support. And in my career, I've seen this quite a bit, working with the International Red Cross, civil society organizations, where the demand oftentimes from donors for evidence burdens the very programming that is supposed to be empowering. We often hear what gets measured gets done, but it's worth remembering the other witticism, which is not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So I guess I'm referring to this long-standing debate that's been in and beyond evaluation between quantitative and qualitative methods. And don't get me wrong, quantitative evidence is vital for grounding decisions in data, evidence-based data. But when it gets pursued excessively, it can overshadow what truly matters, and it can even become harmful. And I think OMD is reflected in what we can call the project box mentality, or as Michael Quinn-Patton says, evaluation grew up in the projects. And this is when measurement and evidence is confined to discrete projects. Why? Because it's easier to measure projects, and it helps sidestep some of the complex realities of the environments where the projects are implemented. Too often, what qualifies as evidence is trapped in project frameworks, whether it's a logic model or theory of change of predetermined results and their KPIs, which often get reflected in dashboards, or sometimes we say dash rash. And I think this relates to saying to study something, it was critiquing, to study something, it has to be cut off from the rest of the world, looking at that in science. And I think I can see this happening in this project mentality. It's an approach that prioritizes what's measurable often over what is meaningful, ignoring the unintended consequences on the larger human and natural systems where the project or whatever the intervention might be is being delivered. And given the complex challenges we face today, our evidence needs to prioritize accountability to the planet and its inhabitants, rather than just focusing solely on individual projects or the priorities of the funders and gathering evidence just for that. So I want to leave time for talking and discussion, but to wrap up, I would say OMD is related to an older sibling. I think it's older because it encompasses OMD and other things, and that's what I call OAD, obsessive accountability disorder. And again, this is accountability is very important, but like quantitative data, when it becomes excessive, that's where it becomes problematic. And OAD fixates on whether something is done right, but not whether the right thing is being done in the first place. And I'm reminded by the historian Jerry Mueller in a book he wrote. It came out, I think, in 2016, maybe, Princeton University Press, called The Tyranny of Metrics. And I think he captures this really, this dynamic of OMD very well. He says, quote, "The most characteristic feature of metric fixation is the aspiration to replace judgment based on experience with standardized measurement." I think for true transformation, that's how I actually connected first with Rob, is in the incredible contributions that he and others have made in transformational change and evaluation's potential contribution to that, particularly with ideas. And the Academy too, Transformation, the International Evaluation Academy, that's hosting this transformation as a fundamental pillar of its work. So I'd bring it back. For true transformation, I think we need to move beyond metrics as dogma and embrace evidence that's more open, as Robin said earlier, iterative, adaptive, and rooted in accountability to people and ecosystems that we serve, and not the discrete interventions and the donors that fund them. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Scott. I will add one more question, Rob, from the chat. for you to answer. Maybe let's make it a first round where you can answer the reviewers' comments and that one additional question. And in the meantime, I would sincerely invite everyone to either write something on the chat or raise your hand for another questions. One more question is regarding, please share your thoughts on whether you see nuclear energy as an option or renewable energy, and whether it can meet our energy demands.
Okay, you want me to react now? Okay. First of all, great reviews from Sonal and Scott. Really, you have pointed out to several issues that I fully agree with. So Sonal asked attention for democratizing evidence and ensuring that there would be reasoned judgments that would help instead of hinder. And she pointed out that the book indeed discusses worldviews, and that is true. And you can't fit everything in one introduction. But the worldviews are essential indeed for how people view the world, how people accept evidence. And we need to discuss this more. It's hardly being discussed at the moment. So this would be an essential piece for how we can proceed. So many thanks. Also, more attention for women. I fully agree. So Scott's remarks, also excellent, really great, focusing on the broad use of evidence and basically identifying that we very often have this obsessive measurement disorder rather than a clear way of thinking through what needs to be done. And I find this is a long-term issue. It's not in the book, but it's my personal experience. 20 years ago, evaluators started to point out that there should be adaptive management. Why? Because the situation always changes. There are always differences that you need to apply. There are things that are happening that you did not expect and so on. So adaptive management would enable you to turn the projects from potential failure into a successful one. And actually, the obsessive measurement disorder has prevented this from happening. My experience has been that the people who need to decide over projects basically say, yes, we're all for adaptive management. Yes, we totally agree. But we need to have the actual numbers and the steps that you take. And if you don't have the steps and if you don't have the numbers, we won't fund you. So this was the kind of two phases of the world where the obsessive measurement disorder clearly was the most accepted. And the problem is that in the book, I actually discover or tell the audience that our knowledge about the future is even more uncertain than we think it is. So this would be an additional reason to have adaptive management and to talk about the issues rather than to apply blueprint solutions. Radical uncertainty is the term that economists Kay and King use. And this is actually highlighted in many sciences. The only knowledge about the future of the universe that is certain is what the universe itself calculates. There is no program in software that can do this for us. And this is true for our for Earth as well. Earth is already so complex that we cannot predict the future of Earth. But what we can do, and the book also notes this, is to identify the trajectories that systems have. Because systems are not completely unpredictable. They are actually going somewhere. And we see this with hurricanes moving over the ocean and then doing things that are a bit unexpected, but they do this within a certain trajectory. So the hurricanes come in a certain way over the Caribbean and over to Europe and in Southeast Asia and so on, and they follow trajectories. And we should focus on this more to apply it also to human activities and how to achieve sustainability. So then the question, I did not tackle nuclear power. Why? Because it's rather complex. And there is no opinion at this moment in time that is a unique opinion, or that is everybody agrees that this is the case. My message would at this moment in time be, look, nuclear energy can never compete with the sun and with the wind power that goes on forever. And with earth power, we have a hot nucleus in Earth that we can also harvest energy from. And why would we then do dangerous stuff with nuclear power? So I'm hesitant about this. So over to you, Veronica.
Thanks so much. I think there is a clarification question also coming from Taruna, and then Ian has raised his hand.
Thanks, Rob. I don't want to come off as a proponent about nuclear energy because I'm on the fence about it myself. But it's quite clear, the research is showing that the energy demands of current cities or areas cannot be met by renewable energy, right? So it's a way for fossil fuels to or companies to say, well, how are you going to meet your energy needs? And that's why people are looking at nuclear. And I don't think it's something that can be ignored. And so I just wanted to clarify that the reason I don't disagree that there's always going to be sun and wind, but obviously you've looked into the technicalities of this and you understand that there's a lot of investigation that goes into where a solar plant goes. It's not just every country has somewhere that is eligible for solar plants. The same with wind. There are numerous technical considerations. So while those elements exist on our planet, that doesn't mean energy can be generated by those sources. So I hesitate when you say renewable is the answer. It might be one of many. So I'd like for you to maybe speak a bit more on this, if you could. Thanks.
Veronica, did you want to continue with the
Yeah,
question?
I wanted to ask also Ian to ask his question and maybe give you a moment.
Thanks, Rob. One of the challenges or just to give one of my responses to Taruna is the transformational potential, for example, when all windows are solar panels and when all roof tiles are solar panels, and we have that technology now. So we mustn't just think about solar farms and that sort of thing. But I wanted to come back to this thing about decentralized, because the challenge is our economic system drives one result, right? And what I can see in South Africa, for example, is it's very easy for the renewable energy to be captured by big private sector players. It's much easier to do a big solar plant, one source of finance, etc. Or it can be relatively rich people like me who put solar on my roof. Yeah. So the challenge is the economic system drives capitalist accumulation from whatever the technology is. So the challenge is, how do we make it just? How do we try and get it so it encourages collective solar things on schools and hospitals and whatever? Yes, individuals perhaps buying, but it's one thing poor people buying one cell which powers a cell phone, but putting a solar array on a roof is not. So how do we? And I'm totally with you that I think from the energy revolution side, we're over the tipping points. We're beyond the tipping points already. But the challenge is that the economic system drives one type of result, which is unjust.
I would probably echo with my question as well, since no one else has raised their hands, which is probably summarized by 3 acronyms, which is ROI, AI, and SEER. Because first of all, the energy return on investment is still technically very much based in fossil fuels. So the production, the utilization of solar panels or wind turbines is still very heavily dependent on fossil fuels, and it's not independent of it. Secondly, AI development is also steering a need for more energy consumption, which means that we're not necessarily switching, that transitioning to a new energy, we're more consuming energy. That's the old JAVIX paradox. And the third one is SEER, which is social impact assessment, meaning that exactly what was already said, the local communities are not necessarily benefiting from big solar farms coming. They're not always going to be in so unprecedented social inequalities, and historically unprecedented social inequalities will not be able to afford it on individual level. So what can we do about those? Thanks, Rob.
Okay, so let me tackle these questions. First of all, nuclear power, I think Ian already answered some of that, and I could add a little bit more in the sense that all the current renewable energies are actively looking for possibilities to really become clean energy. So rather than to depend on fossil fuel, they are trying to come up with solutions that will lose out the fossil fuel origin of some of the instruments or the appliances or what have you not. And that is actually happening very fast. Let me give an example, and that's also an answer on the issue of cities that have too much of an energy need. The issue remains storage and exchange of energy, and batteries are now, there is a very fast energy revolution in batteries. They become much more powerful, and there is so much happening that I dare to say that there is no expert anymore who has a good view of all of these initiatives that are currently taking place. So I'm quite excited that there will be a solution to store energy and share energy in such a way that everybody can benefit and all can benefit. And then the big question comes up on whether that will benefit local communities or whether it's still capitalism that decides on how things happen. But have a look at what we are, the current capitalist system we have, which is that the big oil companies have set up a distribution system where you and your car need to go to at least once every month or even more often. And you fill up the car and you pay. You pay for this. And if we have local generation of electricity, the payment is once every 20 years or so. I don't think that is, I mean, it really enables people to, and the system to become more democratic and people-based. And the big companies are, I think, at this stage asking themselves, what shall we do? what can we do? We can produce solar panels, we can produce the gear for wind power, etc., and we can work on batteries, and we'll compete on batteries. But it's really local communities that will decide in the end whether they go for solar power or wind energy or any other perspective. And this is illustrated in my home country, the Netherlands, where now 40% of the investments in energy are from households, not from capitalists, not from the big companies, but households taking their own decisions on what they will do, whether they will go for wind energy or solar power. And this is outside of the control of the big firms, and it's actually human driven. And I definitely hope that this will spread throughout the world. It's already doing so in the US. It's already doing so in India, in many countries in Latin America. This is also part of the sustainability revolution. And let us promote this and support this where we can. So I think I can go on for another 2 hours, but...
I'm sure my husband always says the same, and I know it's true. Thank you, Rob. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. I would like to stop everyone from leaving this webinar before having a group photo, as Viviana asked me. And thank you so much, everyone, for your participation and all the insightful questions and an amazing presentation, Rob. Always a pleasure to have you among our friends, and always a pleasure to hear your thoughts. I want to thank you especially to our wonderful coordinator, Viviana Lascano, for the preparations, coordination, and promotion of this event. And as Hur, our amazing friend, has just put on his camera, I would like him to introduce the next webinar. We have 3 next, actually, in fact, planned for you until February. So we hope to make it really a webinar series. But the next one is especially important for me, and I'm so very glad that Hur decided that we can still have it in December.
Yes, thank you very much, Veronica, and thank you very much, Rob, for such an amazing talk, and then also the accompaniment by both Sonal and Scott. The next webinar is very timely, and you'll be pleased to hear that Rob has actually contributed quite a lot, that the ideas book that we produced, I think a couple of years ago, just in the middle of COVID-19, titled as Evaluation in the Context of Fragility, Violence, Fragility, Conflict and Violence. And this was the time when the whole world became out of reach in terms of, responses to evaluation kind of thing, which was a problem that we were facing mainly in the fragile and conflict-affected areas. So as we know, I don't have to talk too much about it. The situation in the Middle East and also around the world actually is kind of, making it very timely to have a webinar on the issue on how would you do evaluations in situations which are not settled, which are not like business as usual, where things change rapidly, people are on the move, where the notion of development or peace are not always the same. So this is the topic, and I don't want to make it very specific to the book or myself. We'll see. We'll also try to invite a few more people who have done research on the subject. So we would like to do it on the 18th of December. I hope the date actually, makes sense to most of us. I know it will be very close to the festive season, but then Veronica and I were having a conversation recently, and we thought it's actually very timely that it happens now than later on. So yeah, please watch out this space, and I will look forward to seeing you there. Back to you, Veronica.
You're on mute, Veronica.
Thank you so much, Hur, for introducing it yourself. And we keep fingers crossed for your running elections in the background, and we will have the news by then. Please keep in touch for more exciting details, which will be shared soon about it, and mark the date in your calendars. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
Thank you, and bye-bye, everybody. Have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, many thanks for all your contributions and for allowing me to present the book. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Rob. And it's great to have it. Not so complicated if I have it in Latvia.
Great, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.